It was a breezy afternoon in Los Angeles when Charles Jenkins, a black veteran, stepped into a high-end boutique on Sunset Boulevard. Charles, a decorated war hero, had served his country with unwavering loyalty. Despite his modest attire, a well-worn jacket adorned with his service patches and a pair of sturdy boots, his presence carried an air of dignity. Charles had come to the store to find a gift for his granddaughter's upcoming graduation. He'd saved up for months, eager to surprise her with something truly special. As he wandered through the gleaming aisles of designer handbags and expensive jewelry, he noticed the uneasy glances from some of the staff. One of them, a sharp-suited manager named Bryce, watched him like a hawk. Bryce, a man who prided himself on maintaining the boutique's exclusivity, approached Charles with a forced smile. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, his tone laced with condescension. "I'm just looking for a gift for my granddaughter," Charles replied warmly, oblivious to Bryce's disdain. "Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable at a store down the street," Bryce said, his smile fading. "Our items here might be out of your price range." Charles' expression stiffened. "I'm sure I can afford what I need," he said calmly, reaching for a sparkling bracelet that caught his eye. Bryce's patience snapped. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We have a certain clientele we cater to, and I'm afraid you don't fit the profile." The humiliation was palpable as other customers began to stare. Charles's face flushed with a mix of anger and hurt. "I've fought for this country so people like you could have the freedom to treat others with respect," he said, his voice steady but firm. But Bryce wasn't listening. He signaled a security guard, who began escorting Charles toward the exit. The veteran's heart sank as he realized he was being thrown out, not for anything he'd done, but simply because of who he was. Unbeknownst to everyone, a familiar figure had been observing the entire scene from the back of the store. Wearing a discreet hat and sunglasses, Johnny Depp had entered the boutique earlier, hoping to shop in peace. But as the confrontation unfolded, he found himself rooted to the spot, his blood boiling at the injustice. Johnny watched as Charles was pushed toward the door. He couldn't stay silent any longer. Removing his sunglasses, he stepped forward, his unmistakable presence immediately drawing gasps from the staff and customers. "Excuse me," Johnny said, his voice calm but commanding. "What exactly is going on here?" Bryce froze, his smug demeanor vanishing. Mr. Depp," he stammered. "I didn't realize you were here." "Clearly," Johnny said, his piercing gaze fixed on the manager. "I've been standing here watching you mistreat this man. Care to explain why?" Bryce fumbled for words. "It's just, we have policies." "Policies?" Johnny cut him off, his voice rising. "Policies that allow you to humiliate a veteran who's done more for this country than you ever will? Tell me, Bryce, is that how you run this store?" The room fell silent. Charles stood by the door, his eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. Johnny turned to the security guard. "Let him go," he ordered. The guard hesitated, then stepped back, releasing Charles. Johnny approached the veteran and extended his hand. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said sincerely. "You deserve better." Charles shook Johnny's hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Departamento. I didn't expect anyone to stand up for me." Johnny turned back to Bryce. "As for you," he said, his voice icy, "I'll be having a word with the owner about your behavior. And if I don't see this man being treated with the respect he deserves, you'll have more to worry about than just losing a customer." Bryce nodded nervously, his face pale. "Of course, Mr. Departamento. My apologies, sir," he said, addressing Charles. But Johnny wasn't done. He turned to the other customers. "This man is a hero," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "And heroes deserve to be celebrated, not shamed. Let's all remember that." The boutique erupted into applause. Several customers approached Charles, shaking his hand and thanking him for his service. One woman even offered to buy the bracelet he'd admired as a gift for his granddaughter. Johnny stayed with Charles, ensuring he was treated with the utmost respect before they left the store together. Outside, the paparazzi had caught wind of Johnny's presence and began snapping photos. But this time, Johnny didn't mind. He wrapped an arm around Charles and gave a thumbs up to the cameras. "Today," he said to the veteran, "is about making sure people know what real honor looks like." The two of them walked down the street together, chatting like old friends. Johnny asked Charles about his life, his family, and his time in the military. Charles shared stories of his service, the friends he'd made, and the sacrifices he'd witnessed. For the first time in years, Charles felt truly seen and heard. As they passed a small cafe, Johnny insisted they stop for coffee. The two sat at a corner table, unnoticed by most of the patrons. Johnny listened intently as Charles spoke about his granddaughter, a bright young woman with dreams of becoming a doctor. "She's the reason I'm still going," Charles said with a smile. "She's my pride and joy." Johnny reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "Let me do something for her," he said, scribbling an amount that made Charles's eyes widen. "Consider it a small thank you for everything you've done." Charles tried to protest, but Johnny waved him off. "I insist, and if you ever need anything, you let me know." By the time they parted ways, Charles felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He'd come to the boutique hoping to buy a simple gift, but he left with so much more. Dignity restored, new friendships formed, and a renewed sense of hope. Meanwhile, the story of the incident spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up, praising Johnny Depp for his actions. The boutique faced significant backlash, and Bryce was promptly dismissed. The store's owner issued a heartfelt apology to Charles, inviting him back as an honored guest. Charles's granddaughter was overjoyed with her gift, and even more inspired by the story behind it. She vowed to carry forward the lessons of courage, kindness, and standing up for what's right. Lessons her grandfather and Johnny Depp had demonstrated so powerfully. As for Johnny, he continued to use his platform to advocate for fairness and compassion. That day on Sunset Boulevard became a defining moment, not just for Charles and Johnny, but for everyone who witnessed it. It was a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one person standing up to make a world of difference.